migrating to Australia. It's December. I'm Grant Williams. It's bright, it's sunny where I'm situated in the world, and we're talking optimism, good news. And when things are good, you take stock and you invest in your own future. And David Bongiorno, Australia's, let's say you're looking rather dapper today, David. But I've been following you on Twitter this week, and I think you're Australia's most erudite migration agent. How are you?
Grant, I'm very good. I am excited today because we're coming into the holiday season. We're keeping the programs interesting. Today, we've got a Ghanaian, Romanian, Aussie. He's a pilot. He's a lawyer. He's William Atoh. Will, how are you? Welcome to Sydney. We're in Melbourne, and we're going to have a chat about your background because you've got a fascinating background. And for those who are listening, we'll talk later about, Will's on to talk about opening a business in Australia and the basics you need to consider if you're a permanent resident or you've become a citizen, you want to open a business in Australia. Will take us through what the basic considerations. But let's start with Will's story first.
Will, I want the first question because Ghanaian, Romanian, Australian. Now, it's a fantastic mix. So what footy team do you follow?
What sort of footy are you talking about? You guys, I'm talking about the Balmain or West Tigers. Swans, of course. Of course, the Swans in that code.
You just got yourself out of a hole because that's a trick question.
I knew it. I could see it. There was deceit in your tone, Grant.
Because as David knows, there are 3 codes that you can nominate a team in and be a rinky-dink Australian. And the NRL is not one of them.
The Tars and Sydney FC to round out.
And the Swans. So there we go. Are you in the Cove? I would have thought that you wouldn't be welcome in the Cove from what I've seen on the telly.
In the Cove? I'm sorry.
David, I'm sure you know what the Cove is.
I can't remember which section of the stand it is, but it's a particular section.
It's the Sydney FC supporters group that always have the punch on.
I don't remember.
I don't know, but where the trouble is.
The aristocratic side with a ratbag following. The light protest.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Really galvanising here.
So the boys from Melbourne are more into Sydney FC than the boy from Sydney, I can say.
You played rugby at school, didn't you, Will?
Yes, I played rugby league.
Now, no, that Ghanaian blood, natural-born footballer, it's in the blood of me as an Italian, you as a Ghanaian. Weren't tempted to play the round ball?
No, I never really got into the round ball. So and I'm half Romanian as well, and they're all Haji, yeah. So, no, I never got into that. There was a funny story. I made a team. We had a substitute teacher, and he was like, we're really good. And he got us to bring in $2 in primary school. Yeah. And we never saw him again. He was a substitute teacher. Then I lost faith in the round ball. So that was the end of my dream.
How long have you been here?
Since I was 6. Yeah, so I'm dinky die. So I've been here since I was 6 years old.
I have to draw out the Ghanaian Romanian. Was that Ghana via Romania or Romania via Ghana? Or are you a 50% gene splicing example?
Yes, I'm a test tube baby. That's a sore point, Grant. So I was born in Ghana and I stayed there till I was 2 years old. So I left at a tender young age. Then I moved to Romania until I was 6. And then before coming to the best country on earth.
Now, that's a journey that we haven't heard anything. I don't think.
Well, a couple of people from Africa, but nobody's covered the territory that you've covered.
Because Tara Seth went from Egypt. So I don't think we've had anyone who's done the Africa-Europe route to get to Australia. So what was that like as a kid? We see the conditions on the news of everyone trying to get from France into Dover who have come up the African route. What was it like for you?
So basically, when I was young, my first memories I have of Romania. In terms of what it was, a bit more what it was like, I'm going to use an opportunity to give my mum's book a plug. Good. So my mum's Romanian, and she's actually written a book about being Romanian and then traveling to Ghana, living in Ghana, and then going back to Romania again. It's called Give Me Courage by Lenuta Helen Nadolu. And she chronicled that sort of experience of, Europe and Ghana as well, Eastern Europe and Ghana. And basically, my first memories as a child, I had fond memories as a child. Things like playing around the cherry tree, squashing grapes with our feet, making pork sausage in Romania. The sorts of experiences, like for a child, it was I had a good experience. I didn't really remember it, or maybe I was shielded, but I understand that there was quite a bit of racism around in Romania at the time, which my mum covered in her book. But to be honest with you, when you're that age and you're shielded by your family and whatnot, I don't remember being called a black crow. I had more fond memories of Romania. And so my memories were things like playing when it was flooding in the streets, swimming in the streets, and, there's ethnic experiences like crushing grapes with your feet and,
Beautiful.
playing around the cherry tree and that sort of things, and traveling to Transylvania, the home of Dracula, and, just being in the forest and those sorts of things. So they were they're the first memories I have of the world.
David?
And then I can remember traveling to Australia, and at the time, Romania was a communist country. And I remember my first thoughts. It was like I came to heaven, because at the time you had to wait in line for food. There were rations that you had to wait in line for food. And my grandma, one of my best friends, God bless her, Mamaye, she used to have to wait in line for something exotic like a banana. You'd be there for half a day. And so she, wanted to get it for us as kids. But when I came to Australia, I just remember like looking around all of the food, and I'm like, it was all there in the shop. And I'm like, wait a sec. So I can use this money and I can just buy it? I'm like, I was waiting for some sort of, trick. Someone say, nah, there's a condition to it. So I just remember it when I first came here. Everything was so shiny and gold. It was like we'd come to the land of milk and honey. There was nothing like I'd ever experienced before. In Ghana, we actually had quite a good life in Ghana because my father's a doctor. So it's not here, but a very good life over there in Ghana before my parents separated. But so then we went back to Romania, and in Romania we were in, I wouldn't call it a slum, but check it out. It's called Raconteur. It's not. Let's just put it this way. It's not the Vaucluse of Romania.
I wanted to see whether your memories as a younger person of Romania, or your knowledge, it is similar to what I think I had. We had all those news reports of people living, standing in line to get half a loaf of bread and whatnot, as you said, Will, for a day, and getting a sliver of meat and whatnot. But the other thing, that there were two other things, and I'd like you to tell me whether it was an accurate portrayal and perhaps where you fit it in. The other thing was those big grey Soviet monolith apartment buildings, or we had the other vision was the rural village life. So
yes.
So, and the milking of the goats and things like that. And horse and carts and whatnot.
Yeah.
So what was it like? And we're talking, 80s and 90s?
Yes, so we're talking about 80s.
80s, okay.
So, we're talking about early 80s, showing my age. But yes, those visions or those things that you had of Romania, actually, they're not far from the truth. Because, for example, when I was in Bucharest where we lived, my uncle lived in one of these, big apartments, monolithic apartment buildings. My grandparents had their own place, but I distinctly remember they had, these big buildings, these monolithic buildings that they built for people, in the good old communist minimalist style.
In the communist paradise.
Yeah. And so paradise, I prefer Australia. Yeah, and in terms of the village life and the cows and the goats and whatnot, that was some of my experiences when I went to where my mum was born, and that's in Transylvania. So that's the countryside. And I remember those sorts of things, and, the cows, and, they still had carts around that time. And I also remember, getting chased by geese and things.
And then you got here, and I can just imagine you on your first trip to Flemington Market or something like that, and just being surrounded by watermelons and and passion fruit. And
it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing because you're like, and even just all the sweets, like you go to a newsagent. We first lived in this place in a little apartment, all of us in a little apartment in Atoh. And I remember going to the newsagent, and there was just all these lollies just lined up and whatnot. And I was just like, this is amazing. Thank you, Mum. Yeah, but it was just hard to fathom.
How is your Romanian? Is that something you've kept up?
No, well, I can speak a little bit of Romanian, but not very well. I used to speak Romanian. I told you about my grandma. She was one of my best mates. So before she passed, between English and Romanian, we could speak. We had a language, our own language. It was like a melding of the two. But when God rest her soul, when she passed away, I haven't really kept it up. I don't really speak it at home. My mum doesn't really speak it, so we don't really speak it very much. My older sister can speak it a bit better than me because she was like 9 when we left. But I can only say words here and there. And, all the Romanians, they have a good laugh at me when they hear me trying to put words together.
When you came to Atoh and when a lot of people migrate, they seek out enclaves where there are migrants from their home country. The Romanian community back in Sydney then wouldn't have been too big.
No, and my mum never sought that out. My mum she never sought that out. She actually didn't like it. I don't really know if she had the best time over there. She always felt like she was out of place. So, because she, like when she was younger, they're old school Romanians, that half probably descend from the Roman soldiers or something like that. So she used to love playing with the gypsies, which was a no-no. So she never really felt it out of place because she felt more at home, like playing with the gypsies and all of that. And she used to get in trouble for hanging out with the gypsies. Well, that plan backfired years later. So, so she never really, she had a friend that she was in Villa Woods with, the immigration centre, who was Romanian, who we lived with for a while. But so we lived there with their family. There was another Romanian family that we lived together, for a while in the same place to get a bigger place and, between us so they could pool their funds. But otherwise than that, she wasn't really big into, these Romanian enclaves. Yeah. And she always, she was always more about, wanting to be Australian and rather than, necessarily hanging out, with Romanians. She liked hanging out with Australians and people from different countries. I think for her, she actually loved, she came to a place where there's all these different people around there and you're not shunned for hanging out with a gypsy or hanging out. So for her, it was like paradise. She just hangs out with all, everyone that's Australian, but from different backgrounds and whatnot. So, that's why I think she never really took to this enclave. Personally, she never took to this enclave idea. Not a thing.
Mum bought you out, your older sister out. How many of you migrated to Australia?
She bought, first of all, she came out by herself because she's really smart like that. So she came out by herself and then she brought out my sisters and I. So my two sisters and I, my two sisters from the same mum. She brought us 3 out and then she brought my auntie and my grandma and then my grandfather. So, she did an amazing...
Very tactical. Good on her. And you said she's written a book. Is she a writer, an academic? What does Mum do?
So she's a beauty therapist. So she's a beauty therapist by trade. She's been one for 35 years. But she writes a book. She's a bit of an academic. She got a scholarship when she was young. She was, top of her class and whatnot. But in those days, she was a doctor's wife. So she just gave up all her career. And so when she came here, she got into beauty therapy. And then, she's been a beauty therapist for 35 years. She went back to uni and she did part of psychology. But I think, in her work, she gets to talk to people and do that every day. So she just loves it. But we went to the same university. That's and she said to me, she goes, William, she speaks with this, because I didn't do that well in stats. She goes, William, I got the distinction in statistics and you only got the credit. I said, yeah, Mum, do you know that I've got a distinction grade average? Checkmate.
Now, as a first-generation Aussie, you're a lawyer and you're a researcher of the Supreme Court. You're a qualified pilot. Are your sisters similar professionals?
Yeah, well, so yes, but they're business women. They're they've got their own business. It's a national business. They do marketing. Yes, sisters doing it for themselves. Yes, so they're amazing. My sisters are amazing. They've got a business called the Arc Agency, and basically it's a very niche business, but what they do, and they're the leaders in their field, so they basically market construction and design architectural products, and they sort of market them to architects and designers. So, and then the architect and designers, they specify it. Like when they build a big building, they'll say, well, this, use this glass or this stone or, these panels. And so they hold these major events at places that you might have heard about, like the Opera House. But they were hit really hard. They were actually hit really hard by the pandemic because they run events for 600 up to 1,000 people. And obviously that was their main money earner. And that just dried up completely. But I hate to use the word, but the way that they've pivoted to 2020 words, the way that they've pivoted has been amazing, to offering more sort of online marketing services and whatnot. Yeah, just to tide them over till they can get back to.
What have the three of you learned from Mum?
Work ethic for sure. So Mum used to work up to 3 different jobs when she came here. And Elsie, my older sister, she used to take care of us. And that's a very ethnic thing to do. But so Mum was working. And one of the reasons Elsie is such a successful businesswoman is she's been managing since she was 9 years old. So we learned from, work ethic, to be very accepting of people, to be open to people, to be kind, to try and help people out, and to really apply yourself, really go for excellence. That being mediocre is not really. Like for my mum, a participation award, she just doesn't fathom it. You have to go there. You have to, So that's what we'll learn from her. She's very dedicated and very committed to what she does. So a lot of great things we learn from Mum. She's amazing.
You studied law and then you worked as a researcher in the Supreme Court. Now, a lot of young lawyers are listening, or people who want to come and study law here. Yeah. Obviously, an exceptional grade average is a prerequisite to be a researcher in the Supreme Court. An exceptional grade average. How did you get the job?
Well, actually, it was quite funny. I heard about the job because we actually knew one of our family friends was actually at the court. And so she called up and she said, oh, this job's opened up. But I don't know, they require someone with quite a high, grade point average, because she didn't know. She just heard from my mum, that I was doing quite well. But how mums are always your biggest fan. They're like, oh yeah, he's doing really well. She goes, and so she called me up and I was at uni and she said, oh, but you need quite a good, grade point average. And she didn't know what I had. I said, well, I've got and at my uni, I pretty much finished at the top of my degree. But I said, oh, I've got a distinction grade average. She's like, oh yeah, that's really good. And I said, oh, and I'm working full-time or going to uni full-time while doing it. So that got me the interview. And then, from there, what got me the job was not so much that because at that time I hadn't finished, not so much, I had a good grade point average, but what got me the job was not so much that I worked full-time or going to uni full-time and finished the top of my degree with honours, but more that I had the can-do attitude. Mm-hmm. So the amazing judge that employed me, he was like, his honor wanted to get this website. He wanted to get these web pages up. He's like, this is what I want to do. Can you do it? Can you do it? And I was just like, yes, I will do it if you give me this opportunity. And so I think he more so than the fact that I finished top of my grade with honours, I think he more like the fact that I had a can-do attitude. And that's what really got me there. And that I was prepared to do everything, whether that was, heavy duty research or, helping to, review judgments and whatnot, and, writing memorandums of research and whatnot. From that to making teas, everything I did, I tried to do it as best as I could. And I really put in a lot of work. So I had a great time then. And it was just really great to learn from some of the most brilliant legal minds in this country. I'm a bit of a law nerd at heart, and so I just lap it up. And so you'd get people who I was writing about their judgments coming into my little room. It was fantastic at Queen Square there in Sydney, and saying, oh, can you help me with this? And you try to not do a fist pump, but you'd be like, Yes, Your Honour. And then, you'd go into the library, amazing library, and just get enveloped by all these authorities and these old cases. And it was just so interesting. You read these old cases, and I don't know how many you've read going back to the 1700s and whatnot, but they're like, he was a lunatic. And at those times, he had mental health issues. Yeah. He was a lunatic.
David, I wonder if you got the same image that popped into my head, and I hope some listeners can relate to this. I just saw William as Coops in Judge John Deed coming in with the tray going.
Yes.
That
was
must
exactly
have you would have shaken up the idea of what a researcher is. You've got passion, you've got vibrance. They must miss you. You still keep in touch with them?
Yes, I still keep in touch. With some people, yes. So I still keep in touch with some people. So I miss them. I probably miss them more than they miss me. But I hope I think I made the most of opportunities, and I really got the opportunity to work for quite a lot of different judges while I was there on the Court of Appeal. So, and quite a few of them, asked me to help them with certain matters. And so I was just really grateful for that. And I think one of the reasons why is just because I wholeheartedly applied myself, and any task, whether it was menial or complex task, I just handled it with the same energy as you say. And that's what I tell my colleagues right now. And I tell, particularly when they're quite junior and they come into the firm, whatever task, the people who are always most successful, whatever task you give them, and these are the ones that we keep on at Legal Made Easy, are the ones where whatever task you give them, and it doesn't matter how many, or they try to do it as best as they can.
Mate, Made Easy, it's
a great title, great business.
That's a great business. Have you, please tell me you've got a van that drives around.
I was actually in court one day, and I said, William Atoh, Legal Made Easy. He goes, is that your firm, Mr. Atoh? And I said, yes, Your Honour. He said, be careful that you don't have a misleading and deceptive conduct case. I said, point taken, Your Honour. Now, if I may, the orders that we're seeking, and we got the orders, we had a good laugh, and yeah, because legal is not always easy, but we try to make it as easy as possible.
But that's a fantastic way of...
He has done that, Grant. He has done that. Will's looked after a client of mine, a client or two, and you have done that very well. You've come from the lofty heights of academia, and you've got a very technical, in-depth knowledge of the law. But what you've done for clients of mine is just simplify. And that's why we had to have you on, because you do make legal easy.
Oh, thank you, David. I really appreciate it. And I'm also looking forward to getting your help as well. And because, again, I know the sort of passion that you take, and the pursuit of excellence when it comes to the work that you do too. And I think that's why we gravitate towards each other, to be honest.
While we're puffing each other up, it's obvious that you two would work together, because you have demystified and decloaked, for want of another term. I call it because so much of the legal industry as a whole relies on being at arm's length and behind a curtain and being all mysterious and all this 6-minute billing and all that crap, which means that we answer a phone much better than you do. So you two are obviously different. So you're a match made in heaven in terms of complementing each other with the services. So that's good. And I really think you should get a van rather than a Rolls Royce, and it can look like those Geeks Are Us vans,
You just decide of the legal problem, the tray, and tell me about your problem.
The bench is high in the Supreme Court. The costuming is intimidating. Having appeared as a solicitor advocate in the Supreme Court a few times when I was a criminal defence lawyer, I found the experience terrifying. And that's me as an experienced criminal advocate. Are these people behind the scenes, how are they different? Can you give us a little bit of inside information on how different a Supreme Court justice is behind the scenes as opposed to on the bench?
Yes, so I know people find it quite daunting. As a practitioner, I prefer actually going to the more superior courts personally. That's just my personal view.
Daily.
But me too. When I first came there, I came there and I was, to be honest with you, it was quite daunting for me, because you have this image of, people on the bench, and being quite cold. and clinical. And I thought, knowing myself, I think you've got a little taste of it. I'm like, how am I going to fit in here? You know what I mean? But to be honest with you, they were amongst some of the nicest people that I've ever met. And their behind the scenes persona is not the same as their, on the bench persona. I guess some of the times what happens is when you get people and, you got to be unbiased and you got to be cold and clinical, and put it on a facade. So, so it's not really a facade, but you've got to be clinical to a certain extent. And also when people, they might come there and they might not be wholly truthful to you, and so they might not be wholly truthful. Someone catches the back end of it and they're like, oh, this is how they are all the time. But it's contextually, they've, might have someone trying to pull the wool over their head or something like that. But to be completely honest with you, I was so pleasantly surprised in terms of my experience there and how, kind and warm and, patient everyone was with me and how good they were as people. And I was pleasantly surprised. Or what, there's always going to be, people are always going to vary, whatever, you know what I mean? There's always different sorts of people. But I had one story that sort of brings this to light. One story that brings this to light is while I was there, they were doing renovations to the main building in Queen Square. And so we were in that there's a beautiful old building, and I know you have them in Melbourne too, those beautiful old buildings and the beautiful old court buildings. So we were in that building. And I was very lucky because we got an office that was looking out. They have a little garden there and it was beautiful. So, and I used to love making toasties. I don't know about you, you get the toasties, you got the, you can go all out and have, the cheese and the ham and the tomato, all in there. So there I am making one of my fabulous toasty creations. And of course, I get sidetracked and enveloped in a piece of legal research. And I leave it on and it sets off the alarm. And so then the whole court is like all of the courts in that building
are evacuated.
Had to be evacuated. And so I had to do the right thing. And so I was standing out there by the door and they were like, oh, what's happened? And I was just there by the door going, I was like, sorry, Your Honor, sorry, Your Honor, sorry, Your Honor. And they were all nice. That's fine. It's fine. And then one judge comes out and he goes, I said, oh, sorry, Your Honor. And he goes, don't worry about it. It's probably for the best. That case was trying. Probably needed. Yeah, and a lot of them had a good sense of humour like that.
And after that, you went back to fly in Ghana?
No, because I was actually flying Ghana first. So I did. Yes. So initially I did aviation before I did law, and then I picked up law and I was doing an aviation law degree jointly. And then when I finished my aviation qualifications, because we had a fuel crisis where there was water in the avgas, that put it on hold. And then we got back into flying again. And then when I finished, my timing was impeccable as always. And I actually finished in December 2001. So that was only only a few months after September the 11th. And so basically what happened flying wise, we were being told, when we were coming through, we were being told, oh my gosh, you're just going to walk into a job, you're going to go there, sit down, put your feet on the table, start playing that Ken Rudolph I Made It song, and just name your price, you're just going to walk in there, and particularly for the ones like me and my friends that were doing quite well in the course, you're just going to breeze through, man. You're just going to breeze through and get. So we went from that to September 11th. It just shrunk because people were scared to fly. So what happened is when it contracts, people are not moving up. So, you got people with thousands of hours of experience looking for whatever work they can get, and so you're coming and you got 200 hours. So we've got this guy with 2,000 hours on type with 200 hours and you need to get a rating on it. I wonder who we're going to hire. So it made it a bit difficult. So that's when I decided to go to Africa.
And you flew for how long in Ghana?
I flew for a better part of 4 years there.
Wow.
Yeah.
One airline or across a spectrum of airlines, or?
It was one main company I was working for there, yeah. one-man company called
how many seater planes?
Up to 19 seats. So, turbine aircraft. So they got the props, but they got like a turbine and jet engine, but they've got the propellers on the front. There's like, the best way I can describe it is there's like a mix between, a prop piston and a jet. So yeah, they got a turbine engine, but propellers still.
And how many in the cockpit? 2 or 1?
Two. I was very lucky. I was trained under some amazing pilots from all over the place, like Madagascar, Namibia, South Africa. I flew with pilots from Canada, the US.
So you hand and instrument trained, so you can hand experience as well?
Yeah. So instrument, okay, so the difference is, so you've got instrument in terms of instrument, when you've got an instrument rating, it basically means where you can fly in like cloud and bad weather, where you can't see the horizon. So there's visual conditions and then there's instrument conditions. So we call it VMC, visual meteorological conditions, and then IMC. And so, yeah, I did an instrument rating, and then I had to do like West Africa, flying around there, along the equator. There's some big storms. And sometimes I thought, this is it. I've had a good run, Tell my mum I love her.
So, Will, I need to introduce some migration complexity here for a minute. Right. When you went back to Ghana, were you on a Aussie passport or did you still have a Ghanaian passport?
No, so when I went back to Ghana, I was on my Aussie passport.
Okay.
And so, yeah, for Australians, one of the great things about, having an Australian passport is generally the ease at which you can travel to most places and stay most places. But it certainly did help. Like I was because I looked for work elsewhere in Africa. I also looked in Botswana, Zambia. There was an influx of pilots in South Africa. So even though I went there, I didn't really look there. But yeah, so I looked for other places. Zimbabwe, I looked for work. And then, one of the things that did help was having an Australian passport. It was certainly handy. And that's actually when I got one of the breaks that I got. There was a pilot there who was more senior than me, who'd been trained in the US. But we needed to fly. And one of the breaks that I got, and I took the opportunity, we needed to fly. He had been trained in the US, but he had a Ghanaian passport. And we needed to fly one of our aircraft, which were registered in South Africa, back down to South Africa for training, right? And we needed to do it quite urgently. And his was taking time to get his visa approval because I had an Australian passport. And I was in, mate. I was in. They're like, South Africa. They just go, oh, yeah, right, boom. And so that was one of the great things that I got, the opportunities that I got. Then I did my South Africa rating there. So I essentially did my testing also in South Africa.
So,
and you've got a Ghanaian passport still? You haven't surrendered your Ghanaian passport when you become an Australian citizen, have you?
Oh, no. I don't have a passport per se. I have a dual recognition, like a Ghanaian. I've got the document there. I think it's a dual citizenship.
Like it gives you the rights of a Ghanaian in Ghana, but it's not a travel document.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's to that effect. Yeah. So I went there and got that recognition, and so that sort of helped me as well work over there.
Is that the same with Romania? Have you got triple recognition, or are you just?
No, I never got that. My sisters do, but yeah, it's just a matter. My mum could still get it for me because my mum's Romanian. So yeah, they could still get it for me, but I didn't. It was not something I needed. Like I'd love to go back to Romania, particularly because those were my first memories to see if it's the same as I remember. But yeah, I didn't actually. Yeah, I haven't got triple. I'm not a triple threat, only a double.
Will, tell us about how you went from the airline industry into the Supreme Court. Was it? Because you said you were working full time while you were studying law. So what was the sort of employment pathway into the Supreme Court with background?
It was actually quite tough. It was actually quite tough when I came back and I wanted to move into law because I had to put what I'd done. They're like, so what have you been doing for the past 4 years? And I put exactly my my qualifications, and I put there, that I made it all the way up to acting chief pilot, and that I was flying these and I was flying these aircraft, and flight safety officer, blah blah blah. So I put that on my CV, thinking people would be like, "Oh, look, he's really disciplined and he really wants to excel." But in fact, what I got is, why would you want to be an office assistant? They'd be like, why would you want to be? So now you've gone and you've been a captain and all of this. And some people would just bring me in either because they were interested in flying, or they just wanted to know whether I was basically making up things on my CV. And once they found out that I was not making up, or that their interest in flying satisfied, I'm like, so do I get it? Oh no, this is interest. We don't think you'll stay. To that effect, that they thought, because I was then going and applying for to start from the bottom up again, because I realized having all these experience and these accolades in flying had nothing to do with law, nothing to do with law. It was not, that didn't entitle. So I had to start from the bottom again. And so I got a lot. It was actually quite tough to make the transition, because people were like, well, why would you want to go? You had this amazing experience, 5 countries in a day, walking through, like you don't even need a passport. You just walk, okay, it's fine, But yeah, why would you go from that to, basically going back to being a gopher? And it was like, the answer was quite simple for me, because that's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. And that's one of the other things that my mum taught me. You got to start from the bottom and work your way up. You can't, just because, you may have done really well in your degree, or, you've done well in something else. You still have to just do what everyone else has to do, is work your way up from the bottom. And so, yeah, it was quite an interesting one. I had quite a few interesting interviews, but someone gave me a break. I did a volunteer, my first volunteer one, like you, David, was in criminal law, mate. It was the first volunteer, just to get some experience. And then they kindly offered me a role. The first paid role that I got was as an office assistant at Australian Business Lawyers. At the time, was one of the premier employment law firms. And they gave me a break. They gave me a go. And initially it was just as an office assistant. So I basically found a way to save my salary in savings on stationery. Brilliant. And they're like, hey, you're at uni, are you? I'm like, yeah, yep. And I was like, doing quite well at uni. And they're like, maybe you can help me with this. And then they started to give me more legal work. So I became a proper paralegal. But my first paying job in the law was just as an office assistant, ordering stationery and sorts of things, and just going to uni and working full time, going to uni full time. And
now you cover employment, insolvency, and taxation in your practice.
Yeah,
commercial law, and there's a very important function in being an employment lawyer. Do you look after employers and employees, or is the practice geared towards it? Look after both? Yeah,
look after both. Generally speaking, just because of the nature of our work, generally speaking, we've looked out after more, employers than employees. But we look out after quite a few employees as well. And, I know there were some firms, and I know there are some firms that just do one side or the other. But for us, for me personally, it's never been that simple. It's not like a black and white, it's not like a black and white. And I've seen it from both ends. So yeah, we help both.
There's 60,000 of us in Australia, but still kids go to uni. There's, I don't know, maybe 7 law schools in New South Wales, 7 law schools in Victoria. Mm-hmm. Young lawyers listening probably have it harder to get in now than you and I have ever had, and it was tough for both of us. What advice do you have to give to them?
I just stay focused and just be prepared to start from the bottom. And when you start from the bottom, and just really do it enthusiastically, and then you'll get through for sure. Put in the extra work. And don't think that, because you've got a law degree, even if you finish at the top, that entitles you to, an office with a view of the water. Yes, true, I have that today. But that's not the point. Now, you know what I mean? Like, you work your way up. Like I said, I started volunteering, just trying to get some experience, and then, doing other jobs, and then volunteering some days there just to get some experience. And then, as a go-for role. So my best advice is, just remember, you got to start at the bottom and just apply yourself. Go, 1,000 miles an hour to get to where you need to, and stay focused and stay resilient. Just stay on course, because there's a lot of people that it becomes too hard and drop off. And that's where you can really shine. Because if you stay focused and stay resilient and and you're prepared, to do, the most menial things with gusto, you'll make it.
William, it seems to me that you embrace the philosophy that you have to go and get a job. You have to go and take it rather than wait for someone to give you the job.
Yes, precisely. And look, Australia is still a land of a great opportunity for people. It's still a land of great opportunity. And it's a place where you can still come, and you can still come with, next to nothing. Like my mum says, I came to Australia with $50. You can come with next to nothing, and you can still make a go of it if you're prepared to do the hard yards. Now, it won't always work out. There's very few places in the world where you can still come with basically next to nothing. And if you go hard, you're more likely than not to get to where you want to. So yeah, I'm definitely a believer in that, Grant. You got to go and take out, like, you got these opportunities, but you got to go and take those opportunities and make the most of those opportunities, mate.
Well, can we set the time frame a bit about when you arrived and when your mum arrived? How far before that, before the Stop the Boats era, was that? And what the reason for asking was, if your mum arrived today from the same situation, how would she be treated now?
That's a very interesting question, Grant, because she was allowed to stay on compassionate grounds as a refugee on compassionate grounds, and because Romania was communist at the time. It's very interesting in terms of how she would be treated at this point in time. The only reason that we're here is because she had a wonderful immigration lawyer that helped her to stay. It was a bit touch and go. People were saying, "No, we're going to send you back home. We don't need your type here," and those sorts of things were said to her. And
Romania,
I don't really know, Grant, but I think Romania, how it should be treated. Well, whether she would get that same sort of compassion, she would say get that same sort of compassion.
Romania is now in the EU, isn't it?
Yeah, now it's in the EU, so it's not.
She wouldn't have any of the issues that the point of my question is, if she came from Ghana, not Romania, the chances are, if she landed as a refugee in an irregular manner, she would be in detention.
Yes, I think she was in detention for a while. That's where she met a friend at Villawood.
Yeah, but back then you'd be in detention for a couple of months while you got processed. Then you'd be out in the community, and life begins. But
yes. But I think it's a different way nowadays. Let's assume that they were still part of a communist country, because Ghana's doing pretty well as well. So from Ghana, but let's assuming it was the same sort of situation, like she came from a sort of oppressive communist state, and she had issues with her children, being black, and racism issues and all of those sort of issues. Apply that same situation today, and I think perhaps. And more about immigration law than me, but perhaps the outcome may have been different.
The point is about how you arrive, isn't it? It's the irregular manner, and so the point of mentioning it, because we try not to get into the muddy waters, but if you come with clear documentation about who you are in a regular manner, the system treats you differently than if you come in an irregular manner, like we see on the news with everyone trying to get into Europe from the African pathway and the North Australia pathway here.
Yeah, but there's a lot of issues, and David can unravel these, but it's also about, in terms of where you apply, how much money you've got, the countries that you come from, so, like, all these factors come into play. The policy in terms of refugee intake and the relevant government policies at the time, without getting into the muddy waters. But yeah, there's a lot of different factors David can probably talk to that may affect, the outcome.
I think David wants to talk about business.
Talking then and now, just a quick one carrying on from what Grant was saying, Will. You've been here over 3 decades, dinky day Aussie. How has your opinion of the country changed from the land? Is it still the land of milk and honey you remember, or has it got a harder edge to it now?
No, to be honest with you, it's actually improved quite a bit for me personally. And to be honest with you, I'll be honest with you. And in terms of, I experienced quite a bit of discrimination. I used to get called nigger nearly every day when I was at primary school. Now, I was in a school where me and my sisters were the only African people. The next closest thing, there was like one Islander boy there. And he was but I don't experience that I think we've come a long way, to be honest with you. I think we've come a long way in that respect. From my perspective, I think we've come a long way. I think, in terms of that's the way that we treat people once they're here. I think we've come a lot, and I'm a very proud Aussie because we'll give people a fair go, like generally. I think in terms of, and it's funny because we're all, unless you're Aboriginal, your family line in Australia goes back a maximum of 250 years. That's not very far. You know what I mean? Not very far. But we all get in here and then we're like, oh, this is great. Let's shut the door a little bit. Now, I understand there's some issues in terms of how people enter. And we need to be able to control these things. But I don't necessarily think we're certainly not heartless, but I think sometimes, I think we do need to sit back and, reassess in terms of the intake and our attitudes towards immigration because, a lot of people say, taking jobs and all that. And I was seeing this on the business, and we'll get to talking about business, but apparently all the immigration to Australia has actually saved us from recession after the GFC, for example. And that's one of the things that they've been talking about.
Time and again. Yeah. Time and again. It's not a one-off thing with the GFC. Since the First World War, look, it goes back to the start of Australia's wide history. Without immigration, there's no healthy economy. It's just a matter of where the immigration comes from. That's always, historically, we're nothing without immigration.
Yeah. So I think we've come a long way. I think the way that the way that it might appear always, and I know that there's issues, but I actually think in a lot of ways we've actually come a long way. There's still a ways to go, but that's been my personal experience, that we've actually come a long way forward. There's still, ways to go. But funnily now, I think they're like, oh my gosh, and this is why you're going to be in a boom industry, in the coming years, particularly, because they're like, oh my gosh, all the immigrants are gone. This is not good. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. He's not doing not doing as well as it was before.
Hang on. Let's clarify that. Who's going to be in a boom industry? Is David going to help people leave, or is everyone who's here wanting to do a podcast?
You're hilarious, Grant. You're a hilarious mate. David was right about you. At least the nice stuff that he said about you. Yeah. But we're gonna need immigration to come back in and get the numbers up. And it's like here and also in US and in other countries, a lot of the immigrants that if you get a lot of the immigrants are very hardworking, and they do the jobs that people like. Once we're here for a while, we're like, oh no, don't want to do that. I did that. I cleaned people's houses. I delivered pamphlets. I'm good now. Now I want to do the fancy stuff.
I'm waiting for the special visa that they're going to create, which is for Americans in the time of pandemic to get special entry to pick fruit.
Right. That was, I've got host parents because I did an exchange there in the US and they're doing okay. But they're over there. I hope we get back on track again, because fact of the matter is we're on the same team. I hope we get back on track.
We're all on the same team.
Huh?
We're all on the same team.
Yeah, exactly.
We're on Team Australia.
How long have you been practicing for now, Will?
I've been practicing, so I've been in law for about 13 years. I've been practicing post-admin for about 10 years, and then I've had my own law practice for about 8.
So you're perfectly placed to talk about opening a business in Australia. And one of the big things is the business plan. If we start with a business plan, how important is a business plan?
I would say it's vital. One of the things in terms of the business plan, so I'm not a business coach, and I've actually got help from a business coach. When I started my business, I must be honest with you, I started with some ideas in mind, but I didn't have the formal business plan. And I think that actually probably meant that I didn't grow as fast as I could have had I had that business plan. But I was just like, you need to get out there and make money. But I would say if you want to succeed quickly at a faster rate, a business plan is a really important tool. Now, the thing is, we actually have a lot of free resources online that I link people to all the time, where people can get ideas on how you make a business plan, like business.gov.au, how you can make a business plan, the sorts of things that you need to consider. And that's totally free. That's a totally free resource.
William, I don't know if David told you, but listeners will be aware of, I used to have clients and stuff. An established business client would come to me with a business plan, never. And then they never wanted to invest the time or the money that it took to do one. So what I'm wondering with your clients, you've said they're vital, but do they all have them?
No, I probably, they're probably vital if you want to maximize your chances of succeeding or growing quickly. So they're vital in terms of if you want to increase profitability, it's probably in that sense, they're vital, or at the very least, incredibly important if you want to succeed quickly. Now you can go, and a lot of business owners I know, they do have a plan, but the plan's up here, formal plan.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to complicate this too much and go down one of my famous rabbit holes. So don't worry, David. But William, with the clients that don't have a business plan and they're established and they're doing well, and maybe you've got a 5-year history or something with them and they're middle-aged, how many of them have really considered an exit plan other than having some superannuation planning? And by superannuation planning, current tax effectiveness superannuation, because one of the things that I think businesses, and it's the reason I bring it up, is when you're establishing a business, you need to think about your way out and what the tax issue will be for you at the very end, rather than the best way to minimise tax all the way along. So is that an issue that you talk about with your clients, or is that a conversation that's too hard and you leave it right until the end?
No, I think it's very important to think about these things and take a long-term view. Just quickly before we get onto that, though. So in terms of your rabbit hole, Alice?
I was thinking you might be the Cheshire Cat. I think I'm the Mad Hatter, and that's the Red Queen over there.
Well played, Grant. So, so I think it's important to think about this thing, but let's be completely honest. Usually people only think about that when they start approaching the exit plan, but let me tell you where one should think about it at the start and where it happens. It actually happens, particularly when you're going into business with other people, in the shareholders agreements. And that's where you start to think about, the exit plan. And it's amazing how many people, they don't invest in a proper, they go into, these partnerships, not investing in proper planning and exit, including in relation to exit strategies. And when it goes wrong, it can really go horribly wrong.
Yeah, I'll just sketch out the problem so that people who are listening get an idea. It's in a lot of cases, if you're running a family business, and let's say you're running a franchise retail operation, and that you're doing it with either a couple of friends or family, and you set up a company, and then everyone, the participants, have shareholding, and some might be pulling a wage as well. But you work out the tax effective way to operate the business. But then it comes to the point where the two sons are running it with dad, let's say.
Yes.
And dad wants to cash out, and it's his only real asset. Everything is in the business, and he wants to get out. They mum and dad want to do a trip around the world and buy an apartment in Queensland.
Yeah.
And how do they do it? Because there's no tax effective way to do it.
Yeah, and there's no plan in place. And I think this is what you're getting at, Grant.
Exactly what I'm getting at. And
Sorry.
I'm just amazed at how often when, you start a business in an exciting time and everyone plans for the first 3 years and do well, but then you settle into a way of operating and everything's great and you operate for 10 years, you buy your house, you've got your cars, you've got the kids going to school, paying off the school fees, and then you want to get out and suddenly the people that you are partners with have to raise an exorbitant amount of money that they never ever thought that they would have to raise, or to save them, and they're generally your family members, save them the pain of getting the money, and they might not be able to borrow it. You have to then give away your asset to them.
Yes.
To get out.
And I guess this is one of the things, and I guess there's hope in this because, we all do it. Let's be honest with you. Even as a lawyer who, for my clients, are always, I'm always like, let's plan ahead. Let's, think long term. Let's get things in place. Even if we don't need anything complicated, but let's just have a plan, a strategy and contingencies. But personally, we all start things without necessarily thinking it through all the time. But I guess there's hope because what you can do is, even if you've started in that way, if you start in that way and you haven't got the proper legal advice, accounting advice, because I'm not an accountant, but I work a lot with accountants and, communicate to how to, help them get the right structures in place, for example, and have the right plans in place and make sure that it's, effective, tax effect, obviously minimize liability, of course, and then also as ancillary, tax effectiveness as well. So even if you haven't started that from the beginning, my message would be that it's still not too late to do it. Whenever, doing it at some time is better than not doing it at all. And then just getting to the end of it and, and having no succession plan in place.
So then
we get more messy than an Argentinian midfielder.
So if we go to the simple basics at the beginning, if someone is starting a business, at what business is it appropriate to be a sole trader, and at what kind of business is it appropriate to enter into a partnership agreement, and what kind of business should look at corporatizing, and is having one shareholder a good plan, or is it going into business with a few other people and being shareholders? I know it's not one size fits all, but there are a couple of general rules, aren't there?
Can I now, this is a message, is general information only.
We do this beautifully, William. The information contained within this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to be specific legal advice. If you are seeking specific legal advice for immigration, please contact David Bongiorno directly. And if you are looking for specific business advice, not accounting advice, contact William Atoh.
What he said. So first of all, a couple of things. If you're going to start a business and, I would be very careful about starting a business as a sole trader or as a partner in the legal sense if you have any assets in your name.
Okay.
The reason is this, because you are personally liable. So if anything goes wrong and, for example, you get sued and whatnot, they can come directly after your asset.
And in New South Wales, is a partnership the same as it is here in Victoria, that the concept of joint and several liability is involved? So in a nutshell, if you're operating a partnership and your business seems to be going really well and there's three of you involved, but one of your partners has big issues with his marriage and his family and he can't make his mortgage and he owes the bank $1.4 million, the bank comes after you and your other partner to satisfy the troubled partner's debts.
You can assume liability for your partners, yes. In New South Wales and Victoria, that you can assume liabilities, and particularly insofar as the business is concerned. That's why partnerships are very rare nowadays.
Yeah.
And people use the term partnership, but what they actually mean is partnership.
In a corporate.
Partnership is in the ordinary sense of the word, not in the legal sense of the word. So people often use partnership when they're actually talking about, being shareholders and having a shareholders agreement, and colloquially they use partnerships, and that's fine as long as they understand that, obviously having a company offers that extra layer of protection in terms of, it has its own identity, and it shields you from liability because it's basically its own entity as opposed to being a sole trader or being in a partnership in the legal sense. So that's one first thing to think about. Now, sometimes people don't have any assets in their own name, right? They don't have any, and they're just coming here, and for them, set up a company and then to run it, it's costly. They might not have the understanding to do so, right? And they're just starting out, right? I would say if you're in that situation, it may be appropriate to start off as a sole trader. You just don't have the money, and it's better off you do a business, you get an ABN, you do those things, you get what advice you can. You use the free resources that we've got online, like at business.gov.au, and you use those free resources to get a bit of an idea of what you need to think about, and then you can start off as a sole trader. But if you're wanting to start a business and it's going to be making significant money, and it is already starts making significant money, I would highly recommend that you consider, before it starts making significant money and potentially exposing you to huge liability, that you then think about registering a company. And you can have a company. There's multi-million-dollar companies in Australia, some of which are my clients, that they still got they've still got a sole director, sole shareholder, right?
And $1 capital. Well, that's very common.
Actually confidential. That's actually confidential, Grant. Yeah. That's privilege, Grant. Yeah. That's privilege. No, but yeah. So I guess you're exactly right. It's not a one size sort of fits all. People just have to find the right, what's right for them. But I would certainly consider that, and I would say this to anyone: there's no harm in acquiring your own knowledge and making use of these free resources. We're very lucky in Australia that they produce these resources because they realise how important business is to our economy. So they actually provide all these free resources. You'd be hard pressed to go anywhere else in the world where we have so many free resources you can access online to help you and your business.
We're the best. Australians are the best at the world at producing those kind of resources and information online. And yes, the best in the world at ignoring them.
Yeah, look, to be honest with you, for me, it helped. I guess I'm more of that. It's sort of that information has helped me out, even when I was starting a business. Like I knew the law, but not, I knew the law and whatnot, but not really, business. And I took some valuable insights from that. And also what I would highly recommend, if you know someone who's successful in business, have a chat with them. And, you can learn amazing things. I've learned some amazing things from one of my best friends, is a flying buddy of mine, and he's the founder of 2 Men in a Truck Australia. The truck's driving around there in Victoria as well. Yeah, so he's the founder, and what I've learned from him has been absolutely incredible. Another fabulous immigrant story. He came from Holland. He's Dutch, so he came from Holland, and now he's started this highly successful company, and his family, it's a family business and all of that. And yeah, so
David, have you
another wonderful success story?
David, you've got a business. You use a business mentor, don't you?
I have used a business mentor. I haven't used him this year, but for 2 past years, I'd fly up to Sydney every quarter and have a weekend with him and other coaches, and it was wonderful. And I've learned things that I would never learn in day-to-day practice. And if a person is in a position to engage one, I can't recommend them highly enough.
Yeah. And David, I didn't bring that in to point out the specific one, but that everybody needs one. And you're in the privileged position, David, that you work in an office setting when it's not empty due to COVID, but you have some amazing experience around you all the time in all kinds of business and business
Correct.
Situations. So I guess the point I'm making is that having a coffee and having lunch is actually a learning experience. And
absolutely.
And if you happen to be somebody who works alone, like I do, I work remotely in a room staring at a couple of computer screens with a whole bunch of audio equipment, but I'm always reaching out to people and seeing what I can learn from their experiences. And, look at what we've learned from you today, William, already. We already know that to carve out a non-traditional pathway in the law. And that's what yours has been. With the, I don't want to say the disadvantage, but it's a non-traditional thing of being a black African who's migrated from a communist country. And you could have just been sending out resumes to law firms. And as David well knows, at any time there's a job out there. I saw an example on LinkedIn yesterday where someone was looking for a junior lawyer and they got over 400 quality applications.
Wow.
Right? So,
wow.
So you have to look at things in a non-traditional way. You have to network. You have to. I gave some advice, not paid advice or anything, but a friend of mine in Asia. And she's not from a privileged background, wanted to find a way other than this incessant posting secondhand crap on LinkedIn. I'm sure you've seen the kind of stuff. She said, I can't make any connections with any business people in Europe and in America or in Australia and in Hong Kong. I just said to her, start a podcast and ask to interview them.
Correct.
Yeah,
absolutely.
fantastic.
That's exactly right.
A great idea. And I was just going to make the point on what you said before. It's mutual learning. So you go, it's vice versa. So I've learned from you as well today.
Peter in the way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I wear that as a badge of honor. Again, for example, in terms of, for example, learning about, different ways that you can go about, achieving your goal. Like you said, that idea of, starting a podcast. And
I
thought I was on hold. I thought I was on hold complaining.
That's, to get connections with people. I actually hadn't thought of that before. I have no idea about it before. And, I also learn a lot from David as well. And I'm going to learn even more as we start to work together even more so. But I think it's a great sort of mutual exchange. And I find those are the best ones when you have that coffee and lunch and you have a great mutual exchange. So I'm loving this interview so much. Unfortunately, I've got to do a heap of work still.
Last question, Will. Last question.
Second last.
And you too, Grant, when you come to Sydney, come and see me on Macquarie Street so I can show off me pretending to be important.
Last question. If you could turn back the clock, turn back the hands of time, would you do it all again the way you've done it?
Yes. Because, and this is why, this always racks my brain when I watch Back to the Future or other shows. Other TV, you change, like I'm happy where I am today now. And look, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but who's to know if I hadn't made those mistakes, where it would have gone, where else it would have gone. So, and I just feel like you have to be grateful for where you are. And look, my business is going really well. My personal life's going really well. And, despite all the mistakes and, despite all, trials and tribulations, I'm happy at where I am today, and I'm grateful for where I am today. And one of the things, I'm very proud to be Australian, and I'm very grateful to be Australian.
What a beautiful way to end. I don't think we can take that any further, Grant. That's a beautiful way to end.
I've got my normal question that I have to ask. When you arrived in Australia, how long did it take you to go and see a kangaroo?
Mate, that was one of my favourite things. I got a picture of it. How long? It was only a couple of weeks, a few weeks, mate. You've got to go see a kangaroo, mate. When you're a child, there's few things better than feeding a kangaroo by hand, mate. No, few better memories.
Well, thanks so much, William, for joining us. I'm glad David picked you out. Law Made Easy. Is that the website? Legal Made Easy. Now, there's no ethical constraints anymore on advertising the name of a legal firm, is there?
Well, there is some, misleading to say, there are some ethical constraints, but in terms of the constraints that apply, they're not overly onerous. It's just...
Well, luckily you didn't say it and that I said it, because I can't get struck off.
Oh, fantastic. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed this thoroughly.
Come back again, Will. Lawyer, raconteur, pilot, Will Atoh. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, David.
Thanks so much.
Look forward to seeing you, pressing some flesh.
Ciao, mate.
Are you bouncing out, Will?
Go back. I've got a 75-page statement of claim to finish. and then I've got to go and eat copious amounts of pork knuckle and drink.
Magnificent.
Enjoy.
We've still got a few items to cover before we wrap up now.
Fantastic. Well, have a great time. So what I'll do is I'll close out. I'm like my mum. Where do I close it?
Yeah.
Have a wonderful time. A great meeting you.
Email the link for your mum's book too.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll certainly email that through. Fantastic. Cheers, gentlemen.
Thanks, Bill.
He's a force of nature.
He certainly is. I want to apologise publicly, David, for all of the best questions. But
hang on, he's cherry picking the good ones.
I thought I was watching the time, and dear listener, thanks for sticking with us. But I was watching the time going along, and I was thinking, he's done so much. He's got so much to say, and we haven't.
Fantastic. There's a book there for his time flying in Africa. That would have been Boy's Own Adventure at his age. Just fantastic.
Yeah. Now, the reason I've hung on, Dave, and not wound it up is that there is a little bit of irrelevant information for the listeners. Today, the former Chief Health Officer told Australia informally that there'll be no international travel for Australians for about 12 months unless you have the exemptions and it's urgent and all those kind of stuff. So holidays and whatnot are out. And
the exemptions, just to butt in, the exemptions also, people need to look at the website for the exemptions daily because they change. So what is not an exemption one day can be an exemption another. People need to be mindful that it's a movable feast. So it's worth checking. If you've been rejected once and you're trying again a few months later, keep trying.
And
come to us and we'll show you how to do it.
And what I wanted to make sure people were aware of, even though we've consistently over the weeks talked optimistically about international students coming back and that giving the economy a bounce and all that, but making sure that, people can get back to regularising their academic pursuits. But most states had COVID cases in their hotel quarantine, which has only really just got back up to full capacity, and it's looking at being expanded. But while COVID cases are popping up in quarantine, and two of the premiers have said we're not going to cop international students going to their colleges or dormitories to quarantine, it's all got to be through the structured quarantine system. I think it's highly unlikely that we're looking at any real numbers of internationals getting back here next year as students. It just looks further and further away.
What we'll do, obviously, is monitor the situation, and when news comes to hand, we'll podcast it. It is serious stuff still, and nobody should take it lightly. 5 cases reported today in Victoria, quarantine cases, not locally transmitted.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I'm not trying to make it sound worse than it is. Life here is normal, but the appetite for any kind of risk in the political sense just isn't there. Two of the premiers were really clear that their attitude is no risk. And, we had the situation here in Victoria, Dave, that there's no way they're going to risk getting any. There's no way they're going to risk taking 2,000-3,000 people while there's still 35,000 Australian citizens and permanent residents who can't get back here. So there's a real political problem rather than just the health issue. So on a happy note, David.
That, I suppose, let's go off on a brief tangent. That would mean, if we think about it, those who are looking to study in Australia, if you want the full satisfying experience onshore, don't take a student visa now. Don't study remotely. Wait until there is a vaccine. Wait until there is a capacity to travel, and then look at what options exist to come to Australia and what pathways exist, rather than hanging on the promise that a visa while you study offshore will lead to your entry. If I was a 21-year-old or 20-year-old or 19-year-old who finished high school, I'd start my bachelor's degree in my home country. I wouldn't be doing an online course in Australia. The fees are the same and the experiences.
And I'd be using the time and the money that you aren't extending.
That you aren't locally in your home country.
But also to do the things that we talk about all the time, David, which is use your time to reach out to people in the industry or the academic sector that you want to excel in, make connections, network, reach out, do all those kind of things that other people aren't doing. Take advantage of the situation that you find yourself in because of the pandemic. Don't sit there, I wish it would all end, because it's beyond our control. But you can still give yourself advantages, both for just your normal career, but having contacts and getting all that. You know, every time we talk about business migration and general skilled migration into Australia, your intelligence and your knowledge about industries and things like that give you an advantage. So you use it, and please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we will monitor the international student situation and the skilled migration system and go to podcast when we do hear anything that's exciting and new. Queensland opened its state business migration program again yesterday. It's skilled migration program where individuals come on the strength of their talent, academic results, work experience, English, etc.
David, social work.
And that was a good addition. About 2 weeks ago now, social work is one of the key occupations, and it is a way to come to Australia because social workers, along with allied health workers, medical people, engineers, and so on. And I've gone blank on the acronyms.
Yeah, I don't even try to remember them, but it just.
But social work is a way to migrate to Australia presently in the pandemic. Absolutely.
Yes, it's a priority.
But you've got to be sponsored. The priority skilled occupation list, PSOL, or whatever the acronyms off the tip of my tongue, at the back of my head. But it's sponsored. That is sponsored. I must stress, all the occupations, the priority skilled occupation list, are sponsored occupations. So if business sponsors you.
So if you want to know more about that, check out David's Twitter feed, because you had a little bit to say about that on your Twitter feed. David, how do they find you on Twitter?
My handle is at David Bongiorno, all one word, DavidBongiorno, and direct message me, and then we'll tee up a time for a Skype or a phone or a Zoom conversation.
And
tell you what, and as always, we'll talk about what you can do and also what you can't do, because you need to know what you can't do. You can't be led by education agents offshore. You can't be led by advisors offshore. It's always good to get somebody, and if it's not me and you want to speak to somebody in your own language, that's fine too. But you need to speak to people who are here working daily in the field.
Now, David, regular listeners to the podcast will know that I've been promising a revamp of the website for a long time that I have not got to yet. But while I've been playing around with it and preparing for it, I was having a look at ways to make it easier to review the show, because we've had some really nice reviews. We're still only, It's Banny's still the only 1 star that sticks out there. How are you? It's Banny. But there's
Partner visa laws are changing, Banny, in June, July. So
while I speak over and interrupt David, we'll be doing a visa shortly. David, It's Banny might like to know, and hopefully we always want to get some feedback. If you would like to give us some kind of feedback, and look, if you want to give us 5 stars, that's great. I don't care. I'd really like to read your comment to find what you think is interesting, or if you'd like more guests or
spread word of the podcast.
Some other innovations. Now, there's an easy way to do that now. And if you listen to the podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Stitcher, or Castbox, you can enter this easy URL. It's the old HTTPS, which everything is, lovethepodcast.com/migrating to Australia. It doesn't really get any easier than that.
Even I can remember that link without having to write it down, Grant. It's a good one.
But, David, you and I know that you just said that, and tomorrow you'll email me and go, what's that link? I wanted to put in my email signature. So it's coming towards the end of the year, and we'll do an end-of-the-year show, which we haven't nutted out what we'll do apart from, say, Happy Christmas. But
Happy Holidays.
But we've recorded our guests for the remainder of this year before Christmas. But what we've decided to do, so that you will be getting content in the feed while we take a little bit of a break in the intermittent Christmas, New Year period and the early part of January, we're going to release a couple of the episodes that I think, when I look at the numbers, I don't think enough of you have listened to, because I think they're 2 of the most compelling stories that we've had. And David, you know I'm speaking about Teresa and Min.
Model, law student, refugee with a movie-like story, extraordinary woman. And Boomy, her boy, is growing at a rate of knots, so we might actually have her on in the program in the new year, but definitely worth a rerun. Absolutely.
Well, if we can organise it, we might introduce these episodes with a bit of a where are they now, what are they up to now. But David, do you remember the title I put for Min's episode?
No.
Well, it had the words "bashed by Nazis" in it.
That's right. Yeah, Min Duong's story. Min, a book has been written about Min. A documentary is going to be made about Min. His story is one of triumph in extreme adversity, nearly killed by thug, scumbag Nazis, neo-Nazis. Min is on his way to becoming an Australian citizen.
And particularly the physical and emotional turmoil that he had.
Min is a brave young man.
So when I looked at the statistics for all of our episodes, and we haven't made 50 yet, but when we put in the seminars and whatnot that we've done and the introductory episode, David, those two, for the length of time they have been out, have not really got the attention that I think they deserve, because I don't know, maybe it's the way we introduced the episodes or something, but of all of the guests that we've had, they are the absolutely compelling, fight against all odds and then succeed in a way that really defies.
Terzeth was an international model, Paris Fashion Week, on the cover of many magazines.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But she fled for her life with her younger sibling in her arms. She fled for her life. So look, please, if you've got all the way to the end of the podcast, give those episodes a listen. We also have a really special guest coming up in the new year. It's taken us a while, but we will be finding out all about the Australian Immigration Museum, and we'll have a little bit of a broader and historical view of Australia's migration history from the director of the museum, who also has an interesting migration story of their own. So that one will be before the end of January. You'll be hearing that.
I'm not sharing questions with you on that.
No, well,
I don't want you to steal them.
Well,
private set of questions.
you know, whatever happens, whatever questions you want to ask, I'll find a rabbit hole to go down anyway. David, while we're in chit chat mode, how are you finding the work part of? Well, how is it now that we're semi-normal in Melbourne, but we've got real limitations on how many people can gather together in places like offices? Are you just continuing the work from home thing?
I'm back in the office full time. Members of the team come in. Nobody's under any compulsion to come in and work 5 days a week. I'm working in the office, and it's good to be back. It was, interesting experience working at home. I got to spend a lot more time with my son, which is wonderful. He's going into senior school next year, so I don't think he'll want to spend as much time with his dad because his dad's not cool. It's been an interesting experience. Technology has helped us. I think it's the way of the future. That is a mix between work at home and work in the office. No direct client consultations face-to-face, obviously. Everything's done on Zoom or Skype or the telephone. People want to stay, and people are here and will be staying for a long time for a whole host of reasons. But I tell you what, we're big fans, you and I, of the International Student Program because they bring a lot to this country, and we're suffering without them.
Yeah, we've in a lot of ways we've built our city and a couple of our capital cities around international students, and
100%.
Indeed some of the regional hub cities as well. And it's terribly sad that we don't see them back. So now, I don't want to cast a grey pall over everything. So please take advantage if you are in the international student boat. You use your time positively and constructively, so that the old cliche, hit the ground running when you finally get back to Australia, and so that you're far more prepared.
What's your passport and visa expiry dates? Make sure your IELTS or your PTE academic test is fresh. Keep every document updated. Don't let things lapse.
And in terms of networking, notice what I'm doing here, Dave. I've got a new podcast coming out, and I'm interviewing all sorts of really interesting leaders in their fields, and basically
Another podcast, right?
Not just another podcast.
Tell us more about that.
Well, it's not.
When's the first episode go to air?
I'm going to do a soft launch in the next few days, so if people search it in the next week or so, they'll probably find a couple of episodes, but it won't really get promoted or launched until after the new year. But I'm speaking to a futurist, I'm speaking to an internet security expert, I'm talking to a couple of people who have been podcasting for a long time and how their life or their business has benefited as a result of of being involved in podcasting, and then just talking to some really interesting dudettes, trying to speak to a lot of creatives and just talking to people about how they're using or have used technology to take advantage or overcome issues that have confronted them, and then the really strong emphasis at the moment on this sort of post-COVID world. And I'm trying to make sure that it's not too Australian-centric. But what I have discovered, David, while reaching out to new guests to invite them onto the podcast, and most of them are saying yes, but there's many parts of the world where it's nowhere near normal, and that people are not thinking about anything other than getting through today and tomorrow. And so it might be a while where there aren't that many US or UK or European guests, but yeah, if you do come on board, and I'll no doubt explain it in the episodes and the introductions, that we're trying to keep, and even here where I'm casting around for ideas for guests, there's a lot of people got a lot on their plate, and having a chat with the two most handsome men in Melbourne doesn't come up as a priority for a lot of people at the moment.
No, that's absolutely right. We do still live in troubling times, and while we're doing very well in Australia, it ain't over.
And of course, everyone's trying to finish the back deck or paint the fence before Christmas or fix the barbecue.
What's left of it?
Thanks everybody for listening. Look, it's the end of the year. We've got one more proper episode where we'll round up the year and, maybe talk a bit about the plans for next year. But fear not. All the stuff other than that episode coming down the feed will be far more regulated than the last couple of episodes that we've done. And look, I won't lie, I'm really looking forward to a bit of time off. I don't know about you, Dave.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I'm going to have some time off. I have a week off at Christmas and then get back into it. I'm excited about the year to come. Look, the vaccine, when it arrives, will be a beautiful thing. When it does, we'll have to see what happens for the year. But, the one constant for this year and next year is the Migrating to Australia podcast.
And so, dear listener, thanks for sticking with us. It's been a challenging year for us all.
It has. It truly has. It truly has. Everyone's got to stay safe. Got to stay safe, everyone. Ciao.
Wash your bloody hands and wear a mask.
Always wear a mask, even when they say not to. Grant, I don't go out without a mask on. The moment I'm inside at a cafe or in the office floor, office building, mask on.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, David. Been a pleasure again.
Ciao.